Pledge of Allegiance. Will the secretary please call roll? And just an announcement for tonight, we do have a Spanish translation available for those who may need it. We have devices in the lobby for you to use. Queríamos dar la información que sí va a haber traducciones en español, so si necesita ayuda o quiere ir al lobby a agarrar uno de los aparatos que tienen, si puede pasar al lobby, ahí le van a poder ayudar. Will the secretary please call roll?
Commissioner Benninger,
Present.
Commissioner Camilla,
Here.
Commissioner Leo,
Here.
Commissioner Pham,
Here.
Commissioner Wu,
Here.
Vice Chair Ramos, Chair Oliva,
Here.
Chair quorum has been reached at 6:44.
Before we begin, I would like to remind my fellow commissioners to turn your microphones on when speaking and off when not speaking. And when speaking, please place the microphone about 4 inches away from you. Thank you. Members of the public may attend public commission meetings in person or virtually via Zoom. I now invite the commission secretary to describe the way the public can access and participate in this meeting.
This meeting is being live streamed via our portal at This meeting is being live streamed via our portal at www.santa-ana.primegov.com/public/portal and to YouTube at www.youtube.com/City of Santa Ana videos. If you would like to provide public comment, you may do so in the following way. Join the meeting via Zoom, enter meeting ID number 822-2941-4519. When the item that you would like to comment on is being discussed, select the hand icon to let us know you would like to speak. You will be called upon by the name you entered. You can also join the meeting by calling 669-900-6833. Enter meeting ID number 822-2941-4519. When the item that you would like to comment on is being discussed, press 9 to let us know you would like to speak. You will be called upon by the last 3 digits of your phone number. After you're called upon, you may press 6 to unmute yourself. For those who are attending this meeting in person and would like to provide public comment, please fill out a request to speak form located in the lobby and turn it into the secretary. All speakers will have 3 minutes to speak. I will alert you when your time is up.
Moving on to public comment. As this is a special meeting, we invite the public to speak on items listed on the agenda only. The city attorney will provide further clarification.
Thank you so much, Chair. Good evening. I just wanted to clarify that the substantive item on the agenda tonight is the Transit Zoning Code amendments. As you recall, we had a public hearing on February 24th where we had about 33 speakers, about 2 hours of public testimony. At that time, the public hearing was closed, so no additional testimony will be taken during that item. But if folks want to speak at this time, they're welcome to. This is their opportunity to do that. They will be heard, but it will not necessarily be it will not be part of the public record. But if you spoke at the last meeting, rest assured your comments have been entered into the record and they're part of the public hearing for this item. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Secretary, does anyone wish to speak?
If you're attending this meeting in person and would like to comment, please fill out a request to speak form and turn it into a secretary. If you're participating via Zoom and would like to comment, please select the hand icon. Once you're called, please unmute yourself and state your name for the record. If you're calling in and would like to comment, please dial 9. Once you're called, you may unmute yourself by pressing 6 and state your name for the record. Chair, we do have some speakers in person.
I will call some names and I will have the folks stand in line in the aisle so we can move through the comments faster. I call forward David Roach, Harvey Beigel, Joe Andrade, and Michael Andrade.
Good evening, once again, commissioners and staff. I do appreciate time to talk. My main hope tonight is that I put questions in your minds to ask of staff. I understand this isn't going on the record. I don't want to be repetitive of something else I said. My name is Harvey Beigel. My property and my business is operated at 1025 North Santiago, which is a truck, bus, and commuter lane, and directly on the east side of our property line is the Logan neighborhood. So I know Pepa, Sam Romero, Joe, had many conversations with him. We're not the problem. The problem that Logan has is inside the neighborhood. And it's caused by the city's prior zoning to allow industries to go in there and embedded in that community. So throughout this whole process, they need relief. Now I'm going to get to my questions, please. I could be described by these documents as a noxious users, but if you came out and saw my property, what I'm doing, you wouldn't think that would be it. And I don't know if this word primary business is not what my recycled oil is. My business is generally a zoning contractor. I want to know if primary business excludes me from this potential noxious stuff. But anyway, on the frequent asked questions that was passed out at the last hearing, on number 10, it describes what happens if you are a noxious user, and that's why I'm so concerned about not being classified. It basically says business ownership change takes you out of a conforming status and drops you into the regular zone for whatever that property was zoned for. And I don't know if that means my son, who's taking it over, because I'm trying to retire. Then the one that gets me is on the next page at 16, and it says, what are the differences between non-conforming industrial and noxious use? And they listed it Monday night. I wasn't there, but I know they listed it Monday night as 4 criteria, but it's really 2 criteria, because on number 1, if you handle or store, okay, that you do that. And number 2, excuse me while I find it, number 2, if it's regulated, well, you have to have a permit if you store it. So number 1 and number 2 go together, and number 3, the first starts off with storing. So 1, 2, and 3 automatically convict you. You don't get the 4th one. Yes, my operation is inside. So I want to know, from what I've described already, am I noxious? The 4th one was, are your operations inside? And mine are. And the last comment I have is, if I am determined noxious, do I get this chance to have a voluntary compliance agreement with the executive director of the planning and the building agency? In other words, do I get a personal look at my business to see what I'm doing wrong? And just to note, for 36 years, we had fuel tanks in our yard. I took them out last week. I have no fuel storage on the property any longer, or usage. We used to use it every day. It's cost us money. We're going to a place.
Thank
I'm done.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harvey.
Dave Roche Excavating. And I'm curious as to why it's more attractive to have 2- and 3-story condos in places of our businesses. And why more people are more attractive than existing businesses. My building's been there over 70 years. We've been there over 26. Small excavation and grading company. I don't know how we're noxious. And we don't want to go, and moving or devaluing my property would destroy my business. Employees, we've got customers, employees, we buy a lot of things around town and we enjoy it here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening, Commissioner. Name's Joe Andrade, live in the Logan neighborhood. We had this meeting the other day you guys asked for. And in my group, maybe the guy was joking or whatever, but what he said was since it's not working for the, to get the business, why don't we just get rid of all the residential, but businesses? Not nice. That's not good. What, jokingly or whatever, that hurts. This lady has fought for a long time. Okay, so, and what he doesn't know is that you guys, not you guys, but the prior, tried already. Tried to go through Civic Center, down the middle of Logan, and come out in Lincoln. My mom and Sammy and the rest of them fought hard, took them to court, sued them. They won. Okay? Then they tried to block us off from going up Washington. Mom was in a wheelchair. There we go again. Took them to court again, sued them, beat them. Now we got this. We're not trying to sue nobody. We're not trying to do anything. We just want to be left as residential. Our illustrious mayor at that time changed our zoning because we needed to get, we couldn't get no loans to redo the houses. Okay, so he took it and did what he wanted to do. So that's where we're at. That's why all the commercial and all those guys got in there. Okay, that's what the problem is. We need to get it back to where we were many years ago. And we could have a great life. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Mike Tardif, Kelly Crossley, and Jason Rush.
Morning, Commissioner, or good evening. My name is Michael Andrade. I'm a resident of Logan neighborhood, third, fourth generation Logan neighborhood. Sat beside my father, Joe. Sat beside my grandmother growing up and see her fight and push the agenda to have these residential areas, Logan neighborhood. And on her, beside her, fight, and I'm gonna continue it. We've been trying to change this narrative of the neighborhood. It's a pure little neighborhood that, as my dad had mentioned, many hoops that we had to jump through. And I stand before you guys today to really try to paint that picture. We are not telling any fallacy. Some of the businesses our little neighborhood are just not following by the rules. Check any of the documents that code enforcement, have records of a number of these businesses are not following jurisdiction that should be. And therefore, we think it's about time to change zone areas back to what it should have been, what it was. And my house stands before fairly new house. There's other houses there, and we're looking to beautify that area before it goes on for my children, so forth. That's kind of the goal, the idea. That's why I stand before you guys, pass that legacy on, that tradition, that thing, finish what grandmother started, along with the resident. That's all I really have to say. But I've heard a number of these businesses talk really down of this neighborhood. I stand before you. I am a resident of that neighborhood, and I do talk to my residents, and we are trying to beautify it from within. So all I really got to say. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Mike Tardif, longtime business owner, property owner, Santa Ana resident. I'm all for Logan neighborhood. There's a lot can be done there without actually devastating a whole swath of industrial business properties. I'm commenting on the train station meeting last Monday. This is my impressions of when the industrial and the residents collaborated, which seemed to work out okay. We appreciate that opportunity to collaborate with the residences. The meeting between residents and business owners revealed a critical takeaway. Many residents do not want to shut down all or even most businesses. nor do they support an unjust land grab for the benefit of gentrifying developers. Instead, they seek a fair and balanced approach that targets the true offenders, the so-called bad actors, who degrade both the business and residential neighborhoods. The speed at which these zoning changes are being pushed forward is alarming. There has been a lack of transparency and inadequate engagement with both residential and business stakeholders. The draft regulations only came out in mid-January. That leaves significantly inadequate time and opportunity for both business and residential communities to digest, clarify, discuss, and collaborate regarding such a highly complicated and consequential set of regulations. Businesses note a failure to clarify critical details, and residents understand this. That's the impression I got at the train station meeting, such as the overly broad definition and classification of noxious businesses and how that relates to primary business operations, and the severe, egregious, and devastating consequences of legal nonconforming designations regarding noxious, so-called noxious uses, especially to businesses that are clean and may have a regulatory permit for just a tiny portion of what their overall operation is. It's really needs a lot of clarification. The hours of business operations for good conscientious businesses need to be addressed. A business that is cognizant of their residential neighbors and has not had a history of disturbing the neighborhood should be allowed in some manner to operate in a neighborly manner. It's also concerning that legal experts have indicated the city's position is weak and vulnerable to lawsuits. If these zoning changes proceed without due process, Santa Ana risks significant litigation costs that will ultimately fall on taxpayers. The city must
Thank you
recognize that
so
forcing
much, Mike,
property
for your
owners into a
comment.
corner
We do have
will not
the
go
printout
unanswered.
here for us to read. Thanks so much.
Good evening, Kelly Crossley. Quickly, I'll share my impression of the meeting on Monday. I walked in and Mike was yelling and wouldn't let Margarita start the meeting on time. And it was pretty embarrassing. I'd be embarrassed for him to stand up here and say that we came to some sort of agreement, because that's not true. The businesses, the ones that were in my group, came with zero compromise or zero ideas, except for we want none of this. Well, that ship has sailed. City Council's made that clear. So a group of residents, we got together this prior weekend. We spent about 5 hours. I was at my neighbor's house till 1 a.m. talking about all the different options, looking at the map, figuring out what can we do. We propose creating an SD 84 modified M1 zone. This new M1 zone would remove all noxious businesses and especially remove all recycling, because we don't want to see Blinking Owl become another Bruce Metals. We already are still trying to deal with Bruce Metals. We can't have that happen at Blinking Owl. And in Logan specifically, where you have single family homes next to M2 businesses, that would remove that issue. So removing all M2, create a modified M1 that would allow non-noxious businesses like McCandless Tile, like Austin Hardwood. These are good neighbors to us. We want to see them stay in the neighborhood. But we do want to be respectful to neighbors like Logan and have that neighborhood be restored to what it should have always stayed as, which is single family homes. And again, we don't want any recycling facilities because we're sick of not being able to walk down 6th Street, and I'm sick of not being able to use that bike lane because it's being blocked by people stripping metal and leaving crap everywhere. Thank you.
Okay. I call forward Jason Rush, Rachel Friedman, Michael Friedman, and Charlie Wynn.
Good evening, Planning Commission. So let me out myself. I represent what some derisively call the dump. We prefer the legally binding term, large volume transfer station. So I am Madison Materials. It should be said that the document that was released to the last Planning Commission, which said I have no permits, no regulation, simply was not true. I'm probably the most regulated facility in either Lacey or Logan. I have a CUP from the city, a mitigated neg deck from the city, a judgment to the mitigated neg deck, another mitigated neg deck from the County of Orange. I have to deal with numerous government agencies. The healthcare agency comes and takes a look at me every month. there's nowhere I can hide. As I told Margarita at the meeting on Monday night, if there is to be a collaborative process, there are things we would certainly like to contemplate so we can potentially reverse some of things that weren't contemplated between us back in 2000 when we were approved. Also, we also helped the city in a number of regards because we have property in Logan under Ware Disposal. We left there 15 years ago, which helped to significantly deindustrialize the neighborhood. A lot of people still think we're there. We are not. As to the bike lane, nobody asked us our opinion about the bike lane. In fact, the bike lanes made our life more miserable because it took up at least 2/3 of a lane of traffic. And so now the trucks that queue in our area are far more in the traffic than they need be. No one asked us our opinion for it. The neighbors we have, the loft living on Santiago, and then the new ones across from the Taqueria on 4th Street, we were there before. They came in 06 and 23. No one asked us for our opinion. So, like, chicken egg, how does this work? But as I said, if there's an opportunity for collaboration to improve what we are, we would like to explore that opportunity. As I've testified to beforehand, trying to remove us would be a very complicated and sticky wicket. So just want you to contemplate that and so you understand what exactly we all are. And Mr. Benninger, I appreciate the Detroit Red Wings jacket you have. It's great to see the original 6 represented.
Good evening, Commissioner, staff, and members of the community. My name is Rachel Freeman, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight regarding the proposed moratorium on businesses in the transit zone. At the last meeting, this commission directed staff to pause and allow for meaningful engagement. Now that the agenda and staff report have been posted, we have to ask, has that engagement actually happened and have legitimate concerns been addressed? Because this is a special meeting, the city was only required to post the agenda 24 hours in advance instead of the standard 72-hour requirement for a regular meeting. That means the public has had almost no time to review any changes, if changes were made at all. If this moratorium is being pushed forward without substantial revisions, then the process has not been a real attempt at public engagement, but rather a procedural formality before a predetermined decision. Beyond the procedural issues, there is a much bigger legal problem, the vague and arbitrary justifications for this moratorium. The reasons given for restricting businesses in the transit zone are broad, subjective, and lack clear objective criteria. If the city cannot provide a well-documented, legally defensible rationale for restricting businesses, one that is narrowly tailored to address specific harms, it is exposing itself to serious legal challenges. Under California law, cities cannot enact moratoriums without substantial evidence justifying why the freeze is necessary. And like we said at the previous meeting and come to a conclusion, we recognize the bad actors and most of us are not bad actors and we agree. I wouldn't want to live next to a recycling center either. If this moratorium is based on vague claims rather than concrete data, that opens the door for affected businesses and property owners to challenge it on the basis of due process violations, regulatory takings, and arbitrary and capricious government action. These are not minor legal concerns. These are the type of lawsuits that cost cities millions of dollars to defend. And who pays for that? The Santa Ana taxpayers and residents. This commission also heard at the last meeting that much of the frustration surrounding business operations in the transit zone stems from bad actors, such as problematic recycling centers and the metals, not from all businesses. That presents an opportunity for compromise. Instead of an overly broad moratorium that unfairly impacts responsible businesses, the city should be taking a targeted approach, as we mentioned, the scalpel versus the sledgehammer, to addressing actual concerns while allowing well-run, community-minded businesses to continue operating. And also, too, most of us are small businesses compared to the huge developers that will come in and put in the residential. A vague rush moratorium is not just bad policy, it is legally indefensible and financially reckless. I urge this commission to demand real justification for this moratorium, ensure that any action taken is legally sound, and avoid putting Santa Ana taxpayers on the hook for unnecessary litigation.
I'm really proud of that kid. My name is Michael Friedman. I own property at 1008 Fuller Street and 1012 Fuller Street. I've prepared a few things I'd like to say. Dear members of the Santa Ana Planning Commission, I am writing on behalf of Friedman Properties, I'm Michael Friedman, regarding the proposed rezoning of our property 1008 through 1012 Fuller Street. We at Friedman Properties have been committed to being responsible, respectful, and supportive members of the surrounding community. Our record speaks for itself. Over the past 25 years, we have never had any infringements, disputes, penalties, or any other forms of disparagement waged on our property from the city of Santa Ana. Our commitment to maintaining the building and respecting our neighbors has allowed us to thrive. We have taken the utmost care in doing so. While we understand that the city is exploring options to develop the area, we strongly believe that rezoning our property to accommodate residential, low, high, or mid-rise units would not be in the best interest of the neighborhood or its residents. Such a change would harm our family business and negatively impact the livelihood of over 45 active employees that are currently employed between our two buildings. Many of them are local employees that come from the surrounding neighborhood, many of whom are local to Santa Ana. In addition to providing meaningful employment for the surrounding residents, we have always provided off-street parking for the trucks that go in and out of the building, and all the employees also park up on the on our lot in front of our building, and all the deliveries go around the back of the building facing the railroad tracks, so nobody sees any deliveries from the street. We are trying to keep the local congestion down and promote a healthy working environment. We are deeply concerned about the long-term consequences that rezoning would have on our property and our neighbors' businesses as well, and in the surrounding area and some of the local residents. Like I heard this one lady, a resident, and she spoke very nicely about possibly looking at the rezoning to M1.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for your comment.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, commissioners and city. This week we had a meeting which yielded a number of community residents and businesses and met together, and in my opinion came up with many compromises, or at least what appeared to be a genuine compromise on uses in the neighborhood. The Planning Commission was directed the city planners to find a compromise, and the city agenda but the city agenda is being pushed by environmental justice. In my experience, when you put a pronoun in front of the word justice, it no longer becomes justice, it becomes an agenda. It does not seem fair to place a scarlet letter on all of these previously legally uses and these properties in this neighborhood just because they're industrial properties. Removing all industrial uses is currently the city's agenda. This new zoning will result in a loss of property values, increased expenses at landlords' expenses, and inability to repurpose buildings, perhaps cause blighting and if they're not allowed to re-tenant these properties, or perhaps the landlord is unable to afford any repurpose. Many of these sites are small and difficult to develop as a standalone development for what you would like to have, primarily residential or retail. I ask that the commission reject this plan as it's written. Thank you.
I call forward Andy Schmidt, Jack Haley, Dan Demonsky, mispronouncing your last name, I'm so sorry, and Peter Lamakin.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Andy Schmidt, property. I was unable to attend the meeting on Monday. Spirit of cooperation and willingness to work with the community, I had reached out to the city, trying to arrange a different opportunity. I was unable to do that. Frankly, I was working in Las Vegas. I need money. Drove straight from Las Vegas back to Santa Ana to try and reach the meeting. Just couldn't do it. So I moved here 3.5 years ago. I was attracted to the city of Santa Ana because of its eclectic nature. In speaking about Santa Ana, it does not have a Disneyland. It does not have a Knott's Berry Farm. It does a professional sports team or a stadium. But what it does have is a very eclectic nature, a great community that's mixed in the sense that there's industrial, residential. I was attracted to the blend. It had everything that I needed. I had done a lot of work in Santa Ana. I continue to do a lot of work. I'm an environmental consultant. I represent a lot of local businesses. I've worked in the South Basin Groundwater Protection Program. I've worked on your injection wells in Centennial Park to keep the duck ponds filled by the high school. I've represented local businesses in regards to Cal EPA, misidentified as polluters, remediated contaminated properties. In terms of environmental justice, I don't know what all that means in the legal terms, but in my life it means is I've done a lot of work for local businesses to keep them into compliance, to help them mediate property values. As a business owner moving to Santa Ana, I believe that the adoption of these amendments will send a loud and clear signal to other businesses to invest in Santa Ana that this is had I known 3.5 years ago that I would be staking my life savings to make a down payment on a property, I would have gone to another city. I would urge you to please reach a compromise that works for everybody. Spirit of my eyes and coming back from Las Vegas, I was willing to do anything, speak to local. I was asking to speak to local representatives and try and come up with an arrangement how I can fit in better. That's all I say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, my name is Jack Haley. Thank you for letting me speak in front of you today. I am a local resident. I'm a resident of Santa Ana. I'm a partner with Lead Associates Commercial Real Estate. I'm on the board of directors of the Santa Ana Chamber of Commerce. I was at the meeting at the train station on Monday, and at the start of the meeting, I heard that the notes that we were taking would end up at the commissioner's desks or be provided to you all. I want to find out if you were able to see the notes from the breakout sessions. Maybe not. I took a full page of notes. I have a feeling they probably didn't get in front of you. The question that was asked is, can industrial businesses operate next to residential? And throughout the country, throughout Orange County, throughout LA County, that occurs. 99% of the businesses in this zone are not noxious. They package boxes, they distribute items, they distribute building materials, they assemble furniture, what have you. They're not noxious businesses. They don't disturb the residences. There's a couple bad actors that could be eliminated or sanctioned or dealt with in other manners. I like the suggestion of changing the zoning from allowing M2 to M1, not taking away people's property rights. The thing I see here is, or here is, we're doing this for environmental justice. It's coming from the state level to where we're at. I think you need to think about the environmental issues that are going to occur when you put 10 to 15,000 more people in this zone. You're going to have traffic problems, you're going to have parking problems, you're going to have more crime. The city can't even manage the current crime problems and the homelessness today, and they're going to add, 10 to 15,000 more people there. They're going to have gridlock on all those major streets in and out of the city at rush hour, a lot worse than it is today. What hasn't been provided, I haven't seen it, is air quality studies from 20, 30 years ago to today. These people are not polluting the air. But what's polluting the air is where the zone is. It's next to the 5 freeway. There's rush hour traffic there. It's next to the train station and a bus depot. There's environmental problems built in with where the zone is today. I know a lot of these property owners and business owners, they're very conscientious of the neighborhoods and the people that are here. I think that what I see as a problem is the city isn't saying, hey, we want you to stay in the city. We'll relocate you to somewhere else in the city. They're not giving these people alternatives to say, hey, how about move over to Harbor Warner? There's no available property for them. They're being disregarded, not included in this other than recently. The moratorium started in April without any community discussions. There was nothing like this that occurred back then. It started recently, the last couple of months. So the other issue I see is retail parking. How are you going to convert a industrial property?
Thank you so much
two
for your
different parks
comment,
to
Jack.
4-to-1 park?
Thank you so much for your comment. We appreciate
you.
you coming. Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners and staff and participants. My name is Dan Dominowski. I represent Maxima Investments, a property owner at 941 East 4th Street. We have a business there that's called Mencal Recycling. I'm here today again to express our support of the goals and objectives of the transit zoning, the TZC changes. Change is difficult, and the zoning and usage changes are probably some of the most difficult changes to make. But we, as a property owner and business, we look forward to working with the city and evolving as we help to change the usage in the area around the transit center in a cooperative manner. Appreciate you taking the time for the input from the public, although I've been here for more than 30 years. Only recently have I been going up in public. This is 4 times in less than 30 days, but it's a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Peter and Danielle Tardif.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Peter Lamakin. I'm probably one of the few, if not the only person that owns a residence and zoned business on Logan Street in Santa Ana, or probably in the area. So much to think about here. I'm not sure what to talk about per se, because I think a lot of it's already been said and very well. So I just want to say, I hope you guys consider the devastation that is going to be wrought because of this. I'd love to give Logan neighborhood back, the Andrade family and whoever's there. But, to just go ahead and legislate us out, it's totally unfair. Second of all, I think it's wrong if we decide that this is the residents against the business owners. It's not. It's not. There are plenty of residences on Logan Street who still support the existence of my property there and what we do. Good friends. I've said it last time at the last meeting. Good friends live in that same neighborhood. My problem is the taking of value. Just the moratorium alone has taken a lot of value from our properties. I'm unable to lease my property. So I ask you to consider this carefully. Although you think you have a legal way to do this, fine. But this is not just a legal issue. This is a moral issue as well. And it's shameful if there's not some contrition on the other side to say, yeah, we understand you're losing a lot. How can we help you get that back?
My name is Danielle Adams, not Danielle Tardif anymore, but I'm here to finish my dad's speech here. So here we go. The city's action should be focused on directly addressing the primary polluters rather than punishing responsible businesses. Consider removing the M2 overlay, but allowing the M1 light industrial with modifications to remove hazardous operations to remain. Ensure the I'm going to cry. Ensure the responsible property owners retain the ability to re-tenant their buildings. Guaranteeing transparency in decision-making process and fully informing stakeholders. My dad's business isn't even in the Logan neighborhood. We completely support the Logan neighborhood, but the bad people are making it terrible for all the people that own a commercial or industrial building in the area. We are not here to oppose progress, but rather to advocate for a thoughtful, legally sound, and community-supported solution. A rush decision that ignores legitimate concerns will lead to economic harm, property devaluation, and costly legal battles and unnecessary delays. If the city truly seeks to create a better Santa Ana, it must listen to those who live and work here, not just check a box. We strongly urge the Planning Commission not to support the proposed ordinance and to recommend the council that the moratorium be extended as allowed by California law and engage in a more transparent, collaborative process that protects both residents and business. Thank you.
Do we have any speakers on Zoom?
Yes, we have 5 speakers. I will call their name out and they can unmute themselves. Christy Taylor, can you please unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I appreciate the time tonight and I so appreciate everybody's comments. I just want to reiterate some things that I think we have some definite challenges, and I am very sympathetic to the residents who would want to live next to these bad actors and create these issues. I think that one of the commissioners the last time said we should go after those folks and we should deal with them. But I would really encourage the commissioners to rethink what is on the table today as you are eliminating outright, with really not clear rationale, why you would punish all these businesses by eliminating M1 and M2. And I like the resident who got up before and talked about we can compromise, we can leave M1. These are the people, my property, my tenants, who are good citizens. We don't create a noxious situation. We don't pollute. We've improved the property. We pay our taxes. We employ people. But I, for the life of me, don't understand why we are being punished at the hands of people who are creating issues for the community. And it just seems to me like this is a very broad-brushed approach that is not being thoughtful. It is fraught with legal issues. I have sought counsel on this front and been assured about what all the issues are. I don't think anybody wants to spend taxpayer money to get into a lawsuit. But I really, really think that we actually do have a way forward and we do have a compromise. And whether we need to take some time to do that, it sounds like we do. It sounds like the residents are open to it. The business owners who are not the offenders are open to it. I think we can come up with a much, much better solution than what is being proposed today, and not take property without compensation, not devalue property, not run businesses out of Santa Ana. I also own property in Irvine. We coexist. We coexist with a recycling center. We coexist with apartments, residents. We don't have any of these issues. So as the speaker before talked, it is quite possible to coexist. And I just would really encourage the commissioners to rethink a better compromise and a better balanced approach that will help the residents, but also maintain the value of the property and the businesses. So thank you very much. I really appreciate everyone's efforts.
Thank you.
Tomas Castro, can you unmute yourself?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Tomas Castro, and I'm urging you to adopt the SD 84 Transit Zoning Code tonight. For too long, Santaneras have struggled with the disproportionate amount of Orange County's industrial pollution burden. CalEnviro Screen 4.0 shows Santa Ana neighborhoods are in the highest percentiles for asthma, cardiovascular disease, and lung cancer. And a UCI study from 2022 also demonstrated a strong correlation between pediatric asthma rates and the nearby industrial sources of pollution responsible for this public health crisis. Passing this code change could bring a measure of alleviation to the families who have suffered for too long under historic environmental injustices. Last December, I was fortunate to attend a community workshop held by Green MPNA, where parents recounted stories of their children missing school due to health concerns. And in that vein, I'm asking that the city extend these zone changes to Southeast Santa Ana neighborhoods such as Madison Park, which suffer from similar industrial pollution. More expedited implementation of the 77 EJ actions in the general plan is also of utmost necessity. So please continue to work with community members so that Santa Ana can achieve a future where lives are not cut short from these deadly industrial pollution sources. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephanie, can you please unmute yourself? Stephanie, I know you unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for your patience. Good evening, commissioners and staff. I want to say thank you for another opportunity to provide feedback as a resident who is boots on the ground. I continue to support the proposed changes to the TCZ zone with the exception of the storage units. I feel that noxious industrial zones and storage units are not compatible with our residential neighborhood for many reasons that I have described at all the previous meetings before in person. And, you know, it's the topics that everybody touches on, which is the air pollution, the noise pollution, exasperation of the vandalism, crime, homelessness problems. I feel that revitalizing this neighborhood with still maybe a commercial mixed-use zone, market value housing, some premium grocery stores will enhance economic growth, sustainability, and community well-being. Other cities have successfully transitioned industrial areas into thriving commercial mixed-use developments, and I feel that Santa Ana should be next. So I want to say that I find that this is an opportunity to modernize our city, boost property values, and create a more vibrant, livable community. So once again, I support the changes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number ending in 337, can you please unmute yourself?
Hello, my name is Amy. I live in the Lacey neighborhood. I want to propose the approval of the changes, but one of the changes I actually wanted to call out is the expansion to our storage facility. Given that the situation of the zoning that we're getting to now with the fight between Lacey and Logan against the property was how this was rezoned in the past, and the fact that we're trying to move forward as a city and also as a community, and still allowing such carve out is going to be a detriment to a neighborhood that's under development, especially for mixed use and commercial area. So I advise that to really reconsider that carve out in the Lacey neighborhood. And I understand there's a lot of concern from the business owner, but there's going to be some business owner that should not be in there, both in the health risk and also the inviting of transit and also graffiti, and just let's revitalize Santa Ana. Make it a place there that we can live both with the businesses that are in compliance and also a resident. Thank you.
Thank you.
Erica Gonzalez, can you please unmute yourself?
Yes, hello, good evening. Good evening, Planning Commission and members of the public. My name is Erica Gonzalez, and I am a lifelong resident of the Delhi neighborhood, as well as a small business owner from the Main Street Corridor, a leader of the Delhi Neighborhood Association, and the Finance and Logistics Director of Orange County Environmental Justice. I have been a community organizer in Santa Ana for more than a decade, and I am in support of the SD 84 Transit Zoning Code update. And I appreciate the city's continued collaboration with residents and community-based orgs, such as Green MPNA, that have years of experience and research to support the elimination of the M1 and M2 zoning in the Logan and Lacey neighborhoods. As an advocate for our most marginalized communities and a resident in what the EPA has designated as one of the 5 EJ clusters here in Santa Ana because of the prolonged systemic discrimination that these neighborhoods have faced due to polluting industries. As a leader of the Delhi Neighborhood Association and a member of GUAL, a resident-led committee in the Madison neighborhood, I, as well as my neighbors and fellow organizers, would love to see a similar moratorium proposed along the standard industrial corridor. For folks who are asking where the evidence of the years of pollution endured by these residents is located, I encourage them to research the California Department of Toxic Substances Control, who oversees the cleanup of many of these sites in California, including in Santa Ana. The DTSC's goal is to protect people and the environment from toxic substances. While I can understand that not all of the businesses in these areas are guilty of being polluters, the truth of the matter is that an alarming number of them are, and they've gone decades and generations without any checks and balances. All we are asking as residents is that our health be put at the forefront of these discussions. While it may affect the pocketbooks and bottom lines for many of these businesses here today, the health, well-being, and quality of life is far more valuable to not only myself, but thousands of residents and organizers. From an article from the LAist by Yusura Farsan, I'd like to quote that the moratorium suspends new industrial activity and hits pause on any existing expansion projects until March of 2025 in the neighborhoods of Logan and Lacey. Over 130 businesses across 450 acres will be affected by the moratorium. And during the pause in industrial activity, city staffers will track calls to law enforcement and the fire department and work with other agencies to determine the health risks to the neighborhoods from having these businesses in close proximity. In 2022, Orange County Fire Authority received 66 calls for life-threatening health emergencies, with 29 of those calls specifically for respiratory issues. In 2023, the number of calls increased by 7%. Patricia Flores Irarrázaval, who grew up in Santa Ana, knows firsthand about the health impacts. My mom, without being an environmental expert, knew that she had to walk through the Logan, Lacey, Delhi neighborhoods to get to work, and that the exposure to industrial air pollution is probably what gave them and their siblings asthma. End quote. A GRIS report last year highlighted how even though the EPA's toxic release inventory shows the presence of 99 sites where hazardous material could have been released in Santa Ana, state business records noted that
Thank you
300
so much
active...
for your comment. We appreciate you logging on and sharing your comment with us.
Leonel Flores, can you please unmute yourself?
Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Leonel Flores. I'm from the Madison Park neighborhood and a program manager for Green MPNA. I am here in support of the SD 84 Transit Zoning Code update, and I would like to encourage the Planning Commission to move forward and approve this update as well. I wanted to point out something that a lot of the commenters have failed to mention today in terms of affecting businesses. Something that was clarified at Monday's meeting was that even with this update passing, the businesses are going to be allowed to continue to operate. So a lot of them are mentioning that they're going to take away our business, but that's something that was clarified on Monday. That's not going to happen. That it's only going to happen for the businesses that are the bad neighbors in the community or that are polluting our communities the most. Another reason I'm encouraging this to move forward is because the city of Santa Ana is in the top 10% for worst air quality in the state of California. A lot of people have mentioned that there hasn't been any studies on the air quality, but the state of California actually does active air quality monitoring, and it has determined that we are in the top 10% for the worst air quality in the state. And part of the reason being is because we have over 1,000 industries that have AQMD permits to emit chemicals into the air, including some of the businesses that are in the transit zoning code. So this isn't going to take all the businesses away. This is just a process to be able to regulate the businesses that are bad actors in our community. Right now, the city doesn't have anything to be able to address that, and the city needs to have a system in place to be able to protect the community's health. So that is why I'm encouraging the Planning Commission to move this item forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
We don't have any additional speakers.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent calendar, is there a motion to approve item A, excused absences?
I so move for approval.
I have a motion by Commissioner Benninger. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Commissioner Leo. Secretary, please call for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Benninger,
Aye.
Commissioner Escamilla,
Aye.
Commissioner Leo,
Aye.
Commissioner Pham,
Aye.
Commissioner Wu,
Aye, and can I request everyone speak up and clearly?
Vice Chair Ramos, Chair Oliva.
Aye.
Motion approved by majority vote with Vice Chair Ramos absent.
That concludes the consent calendar items. Moving on to the public hearing. We will continue the public hearing item. Public comments will no longer be accepted as the public comment period for this item was closed at our last meeting. Please note, decision on this matter is final unless appealed within 10 days by any interested individual or party. Recommendations on this item will be forwarded to the City Council at a later date for final determination. This is the time and place for zoning ordinance amendment number 2024-02 and amendment application number 2024-03, amending certain sections of Article 19, the Transit Zoning Code, specific development number 84 of Chapter 41 of the Santa Ana Municipal Code, addressing industrial land uses, nonconformities, and operating standards, and amending the City of Santa Ana zoning map to remove the light industrial and heavy industrial suffix from certain properties within the SD 84 district boundary. Before we continue with this item, do any commissioners have anything they wish to disclose with regard to this item? Seeing none, Case Planner Margarita Macedonio will now provide a brief presentation.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. So tonight's meeting is a special meeting that you continued from the February 24th public hearing to discuss the Transit Zoning Code SD 84 proposed ordinances. And so this is our opportunity to report out the directives that you provided. Before I go into that, I did want to cover some high-level review of the project components. As mentioned earlier, we're proposing a map change. So that would remove the M1 and M2 industrial overlay from the Transit Zoning Code map. We would be adopting non-conforming provisions and operating standards. So some of those include the enclosed operations that are in the proposed ordinance, like glare and heat, outdoor storage and screening, site maintenance, truck parking and loading. Those are some examples. In addition, there are permitted uses that have been updated. We've talked about the artisan craft, product limited on-site production, allowing the use of a trade school, the craft and special automotive restoration service as such, and it would also be deleting the industrial noxious types of uses from being permitted. The other is the adoption of a new amortization section. And so this section does not list specific businesses that are going to be shut down or closed. What it does, it provides us, the city, the avenue, the process to consider, to evaluate if we wanted to go that route and go through an amortization process to remove a problematic business. That's what it does. There is no schedule that is proposed in the code amendments pertaining to amortization. Again, it is a process that involves a third-party hearing officer with legal urban planning background that would be objective to being able to make that determination. So an overview of tonight's presentation. We want to be able to provide the follow-up on the deliverables, that you have given us from February 24th to report back to today. So you heard a lot of feedback from the community at the public hearing. You continued the item to tonight's special meeting. And there are 3 areas that you directed staff to do. 1, hold the additional community meeting with businesses and owners from the area, inviting those who were at the public hearing on the 24th to be a part of that. And the message that we received was you wanted to see if there were areas for conversations, for compromise, areas of commonality that could draw out from this additional community meeting. You asked for financial information to try to understand what would be the possible effects should the ordinance pass and what effect that would have on the revenues for the city. You also wanted to know some additional legal analysis on potential challenges from adopting the ordinance. So we had a great discussion, a successful meeting on Monday, March 3rd. As part of the outreach, we were able to contact hundreds of emails that we have to notify, invite people to come to this additional community meeting. For those who did not have emails, we made personal phone calls to reach them, make sure that they knew. There wasn't a mailer or anything that went out, so we had to exhaust all the avenues to get the word out. We also programmed a voice message, email reminders to let folks know that this meeting is happening, to mark it on their calendar. They're invited to attend. And we also arranged for Spanish interpretation services to be offered at this meeting. So the result was that we had 120 people comprised of residents, businesses, property owners, commercial real estate brokers, community-based organizations, and we also had staff from elected offices who were there. Just in looking at the sign-in sheet, about 58% or so of those who attended represented the business community and 36% residents. And that's a photo right there when we first got together to start the meeting. We aim to try our best to have a diverse, smaller group discussions by having randomly assigned groups. So we did that through the sign-in table. We ended up having 7 small group circles. And one of them was a designated group for the monolingual Spanish speakers that worked with the facilitator and the interpreter. And so each group had a facilitator, either staff or MIG, our consultants who are here joining us. And the outcomes, what we heard from the discussions is that there is consensus from businesses, from the residents, that we need to address the most impactful businesses that are affecting this area. We learned that there's disagreement on the land uses that would result from the proposed amendments. So this could be, why should my use be affected? I am not causing, this pollution, and why am I being targeted? So those types of conversations, disagreement on amortization, what is the intent of that, and how is that going to help address a more polluting use in the area? We did get a lot of feedback on the hours of operation, how that was going to be creating a problem for the businesses to continue. And one highlight that we heard again at this meeting is the definitions. Why not include the term legal to non-conforming use, making it a legal non-conforming use? Why can't that be the same? And so that was definitely loud and clear message that we received. And so it's something that, we took back to discuss. So What you have in Exhibit 1 of your agenda packet is a summary of the community meeting. And it includes the process that we used, and we just wanted to make sure that you had a chance to review that. But it really did provide us another avenue to have more intimate conversations between residents and businesses. And we believe that that was the direction that the Planning Commission gave us to do. So we made the best of that opportunity. And we will address later on in my presentation about how we are clarifying the ordinance based on what we heard on Monday night, based on what we heard earlier than the meeting on Monday. I will now go into the second deliverable that you asked about, which was financial information that would provide an understanding of what could be the effect to the city from a tax base should the adoption of the ordinances and impacts to business occur. So we worked with our finance and management services team to be able to pull data, and the data that is going to be shared, we want to clarify that it's intended for informational purposes. It doesn't, should not be considered an official or definite fiscal impact analysis. There are so many variables in trying to pinpoint what the ultimate effect will be on a business should this ordinance be adopted. And so the data that we have needs to factor in numerous unpredictable factors. So you've got fluctuations in economic conditions, you have potential changes in business operations that we can't predict. So the fiscal information, it is restricted to the businesses in the transit zoning code area that would be considered legal non-conforming. And so with being a legal non-conforming business, there's aggregate information that was pulled together. And so the revenue details that are provided were not able to be provided by individual businesses due to confidentiality, and we wanted to prevent that disclosure. And lastly, the data sources are, as you'll see here, the business tax information, sales tax information, property tax, and utility users tax from fiscal years 2023 to 2024. So what we have here, first off on the row of business tax, this is a snapshot again of the aggregate revenues. And so business license tax are non-regulatory tax funds that go to the general fund. These are, there were some changes that were voter approved in 2022. And there were some simpler calculations and a tax holiday that was included in 2023 to try to boost that compliance. But what we've seen is this amount, and this is the business license tax that reflects a new rate structure that was put into effect, where you're taking either a percentage of the gross receipts or a fixed amount, and that is determined by business type. So what you have here is a snapshot of the industrial businesses for calendar year 2024. The next row is sales tax revenue aggregate information from fiscal year 2023-24. And so with the sales tax, this is again, not all businesses have a reseller's permit for this industrial profile. So this is what it shows again as a snapshot figure. For property tax revenue, Santa Ana's share is up to 19% of the 1% base property tax information goes to the city. And so that is shared with other information, including property location, historical tax formulas, jurisdictional factors that affect this. But in a snapshot figure, what we're looking at here is a projection of this amount in property taxes. Lastly, we have utility users tax. So this was also approved by voters, and this is for electrical, gas, water services. The rate is 5.5% of the utility charges, so this is a reflection of that. We are awaiting aggregate data on gas and electric figures that we expect next month, but we just wanted to note that for your reference, but you do have the figures on water services. And we have our team from the Finance and Management Services who can address questions following the presentation. The third deliverable that the Planning Commission asked staff to come back with was information on a legal analysis, something that can anticipate what will be the challenges legally should the ordinance be adopted. And so the Planning Commission has been provided a confidential memorandum from our city attorney, and it's summarizing the questions that surfaced. And it's only limited to the Planning Commission because it's considered client privileged and confidential due to the litigation risk. As mentioned earlier, the feedback from the additional meeting and prior conversations, we have made an effort to make some modifications, and that's what you have in Exhibit 2 of your agenda packet. A takeaway from Monday's meeting and other conversation is that the hours of operation as proposed would not work for a majority of the businesses. And so there was not much contention from the perspectives of the residents we heard on the specific hours of operation. So with that, staff's no longer proposing any changes to the existing transit zoning code that address hours of operations that you have in your proposed ordinances. So we'll leave it as is. In building off the point about using terms like legal nonconforming and what that means and how that has more of standing for the business community, we've added that as a clarification clause in the proposed ordinance. So we've added that legal nonconforming and nonconforming use are the same meaning as it pertains to the article in the section. So you will see that as an example. The other definition that we elaborated on based on more input is the new definition for craft and specialized automotive restoration service. So, one of the things that we wanted to provide for the record is that we wanted to add the term paint and body works to the definition just to clarify it. We know that this is a special automotive restoration type of service. And so we do want to make that noted for tonight's record. And that would be definition number 23 in your proposed ordinance packet. It's on page 31 if you wanted to take a look at it. And in that section, we also struck out the last sentence where it reads, the vehicle must not be altered from the manufacturer's original specifications or considered a kit car. That was additional feedback we received, so that's been removed. There are other, as we mentioned in the previous public hearing session, there were typographical errors and readjustment of the numbering and the labeling that we are also including here as part of the clarifications. Wanted to move on from the 3 deliverables into the project what is being proposed tonight, that we are looking to a recommendation from the Planning Commission for the City Council to recommend. And the first is the CEQA. This project being identified as well, the lead agency determining that CEQA guidelines apply to this. And so we have an addendum to the Transit Zoning Code Environmental Impact Report that's been prepared by the city. And based on the review and analysis, we find that pursuant to CEQA guidelines, section 15162, that there's no subsequent EIR that would be required for this proposed project. The second point, the city being the lead, that the proposed ordinance and map amendment are also subject to CEQA guidelines and regulations. And so the city has evaluated the impacts of the proposed ordinance amendments, which are reflected in the addendum. And that was included as part of the public hearing materials from your meeting on February 24th. Lastly, there is no fiscal impact associated with this project. So the recommended actions that we have before the Planning Commission tonight are to, 1, adopt a resolution and make findings. And this would be to adopt the addendum to the Transit Zoning Code Environmental Impact Report. And that that is from State Clearinghouse number 2006-07-1100. The second recommended action, approving the zoning ordinance amendment, amending certain sections of Article 19 of the Transit Zoning Code, specific development number 84, Chapter 41 of the Santa Ana Municipal Code. And the third is adopting the ordinance to approve the amendment application 2024-03. And this would amend the zoning by removing the M1 and M2 suffixes from the certain properties of the SD 84 zoning boundary map as designated by the City of Santa Ana zoning map. Before we go into discussion, we did want to mention that we have our consultants here who are able to address specific questions that you may have. I just wanted to introduce them here. Again, you've seen them at prior meetings, but we do have from MIG, Laura Stetson. We have Hannah Park from BBK, who's provided guidance on the CEQA document, the addendum to the Transit Zoning Code EIR. We also have our team from finance. We have our acting executive director, Alex Trinidad, and his team. And we have our assistant city manager, former executive director of finance and management services, Catherine Downs.
Do the commissioners have any questions for staff? Commissioner Benninger.
One of the things that keeps coming up, and I have a concern also, is the terminology or the labeling of a company as noxious use. And a lot of people are concerned that they're a clean industry. They have no problems, but yet the end may end up being noxious, be labeled as that. Excuse me. And I really think we need to spell it out better in this ordinance per se on it. I also have another question too. You're asking to be allowed to shut businesses down, saying that the other agencies do not. And my dealing with air quality, especially AQMD, is they had that ability. Have they lost that ability? Could air quality, if they have a bad actor who's violating air quality rules, could they shut them down?
So our experience with AQMD has been that it's difficult to even obtain reporting data that shows what the emissions are running, and it takes an extensive process to be able to reach someone to get information. They are going by the rules and they're going by equipment they permit, not what we are looking to accomplish through this proposed ordinance, and giving us the regulatory framework to be able to address some of the problematic operators.
But my concern is if you're not looking at data and you're not collecting data, is that correct? You're not doing any sampling out there? You're not collecting data?
We're collecting information that we could find from AQMD, but I'm also saying that there is difficulty in getting information for a lot of businesses, not just the ones in the transit zoning code. We do collect the data to understand what is being permitted, and that helps us anticipate and realize, what is a business being permitted to emit based on the equipment that they're being given to operate that equipment from the regulatory agency.
I just want to add on to the response from our senior planner, our principal planner, Macedonio. At the end of the day, the city as a public agency is a land use authority. We address land use issue, we address land use conflict, and we evaluate the impact from land uses on adjacent land uses. A lot of these other regulatory agencies that regulate their special permits have their own authority on that. So I just want to clarify that we as a city is a land use agency, and we have the authority to address land use impacts.
Okay. Our PA system tonight is kind of different, so it's hard to understand. Let me just kind of say that in the last week and a half, I've had numerous conversations, and one that the city manager, attorney has said to me, and also we heard at the meeting that we had of the planning commissioners, is that as a planning commissioner, my job really is to be fair. And I really say that for all our commissioners, as we're presented here in front of us, our job is to be fair. And I do have real concern that as written, I question the fairness that we have here. I think the meeting Monday was very good. I thought it brought the pendulum a little bit back to more the area of it being fair. But I still see a lot of restrictions on this that is not fair, per se. So let me pass it on to.
Friendly reminder to our commissioners that when you're not speaking, please turn off your microphone, and that way we won't have the issues with the PA system. Thank you. Commissioner Scamilla.
And in Carl's defense, I think there's something wrong with his PA. We had the same issue earlier for the Historic Commission. It's just that one. So we'll, give him the alternative. So yeah, it wasn't you, Carl. Well, I appreciate the additional feedback and changes. I think that at least what I'm seeing is through this process, there have been a series of adjustments made to the proposal, in that this current iteration is better than what was provided to us initially, right? Like, I think that there's substantial and substantive changes that should make this a little bit easier and I think more fair to the point of my colleague over here. At this stage, I guess the thing that I am just generally wrestling with is realistically, like from the way that our code is written, we don't have an alternative option presently for something that's less than an M1 zone that's still kind of in that industrial category, correct? So I guess I'm trying to wrestle with the idea that was brought up by one of the residents around an alternative designation for this particular zone. And, is that even realistically feasible to then create over the course of a year? Is that even an option at this point?
Thanks, Commissioner. 2 points to bear in mind in response to that type of idea. The first is that the general plan update of 2022 did produce a new land use designation called Flex. Flex is a lesser industrial land use designation, if you want to think about it that way. Something a blend of office, research and development, clean technology, some residential, and other sort of daytime supportive land uses. When I say residential, I mean like live work production studios. The Flex designation was not applied to this area in 2022. It was applied in other parts of the city, like close to Dyer in the 55, parts of the West Santa Ana Boulevard area, but not in this center city area and not in Logan and Lacey. So creating a new zone that's like a light industrial to go with Flex, there's no corresponding general plan land use designation here to support that type of rezoning. Forget from a land use perspective, even just legally. And that brings me to my next point too. In any rezoning, the commission and the city council are tasked with having general plan consistency. So even redoing M1 or sort of coming up with a new industrial zone, if there's no corresponding general plan land use designation here, then it would be not possible to create such a zone for application to this area. The comprehensive zoning code update is exploring these things for the city's areas that are designated Flex, but the transit zoning code area, as part of the 7-year effort that went into that leading up to 2022, did not call for any sort of new Flex or light industrial in this area.
Thank you for that. And that's actually, yeah, I guess, your answer is spot on to my dilemma here, which is essentially we have almost 2 options of retaining an M1 and M2 overlay or not. That's kind of what the recommendations are before us. And that our M1 and M2 regulations, at least in my opinion, are not compatible with higher density or even low density or any sort of real residential usage. And then that's really kind of the conflict that we're facing here tonight. And for me, at least in kind of my historical hat on as well, the city essentially in the 1930s encouraged industrial in this area. In 1970s, very much proactively encouraged the use of industrial along these areas to the neglect of the residents. And then that decision was probably, backpedaled and overturned. And we found that balance in about 2010. And now we're still essentially dealing with those incompatible uses. And I do feel that the way that this is particularly crafted, it's, from my understanding and my read, we are going to allow the existing businesses that are not necessarily noxious or really, consistently detrimental to the immediate health, that they'll be able to continue. And even I think there are some modifications in this version now that allow for some slight modification and addition of square footage. So I think this version is a little bit less restrictive than maybe version 1.0 that we would have seen of this. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, and I don't want that to be lost on this commission, that compared to the original version that was posted online for the community on January 15th to where we are today, thanks to the questions that the commission posed and substantial community input, certain sections were revised, specifically the noxious uses definition, the legal nonconforming section, that where the pendulum initially was to basically say upon any new certificate of occupancy being required due to a transfer of business, any legal nonconforming industrial business would basically be required to cease operations. Where we are tonight, the code language between being updated to reflect that nonconforming means legal nonconforming, the introduction of transferability in section 4 of the ordinance, and revising the proposed definition of noxious use actually result in the majority of these businesses, I'll just say the ones that are not noxious at the end of the day, from being able to transfer. And as Assistant City Manager Ty pointed out at the previous meeting, go so far as with that legal non-conforming status could be re-tenanted with equivalency uses. So a widget manufacturer, as long as the building doesn't go vacant or the business doesn't cease for a period of more than 12 months, an equivalent widget manufacturer could come in and utilize the building.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that. And it seems that at least in this version as well, there's a little bit more detail as to what that hearing procedure in the office is. I don't know like how detailed we want to kind of go through that, or I don't know like who on staff is most familiar with that process and kind of what that looks like. Because I know that that's kind of a big fear for a lot of the business owners. It's, well, will this be a fair hearing, and will we have procedures in place to listen to legitimate concerns around their operations?
Yes. There's nowhere in this ordinance that lays out a schedule for any amortization of any business. So when reading the ordinance, one will not see anything that says any type of business in this ordinance is being targeted or phased for any sort of elimination. What's being proposed to the commission's consideration for ultimate city council vote is a tool that could be used on a case-by-case basis that would be subject to extensive study that requires extensive analysis of the investments and the value of that particular business, the improvements, before any sort of schedule is determined. And then once that schedule is determined in that study, it's then forwarded to a neutral, as we've described, hearing officer with the background necessary to even adjudicate that sort of situation, to then consider the schedule in some sort of final rendering of a decision. So one can ascertain from what I just described that there are many steps between today's ordinance and any business being put on an amortization schedule, let alone then reaching the end of that period. So I, again, don't want that to be lost on anyone listening or the commissioners, that this is not establishing a schedule at all. This is simply creating a tool for amortization for the worst offenders that are prioritized and ranked after all other tools have simply failed. And in the ordinance, there is terminology reflecting the sort of promulgation of administrative procedures for administering this, should it be adopted.
And appreciate the additional detail there.
Commissioner Simi, I just wanted to add a reiterating question that we get is, okay, so once you adopt the amendments, what does that mean for me, as a business? And so what it means is you either are legal, non-conforming industrial use, or you are a noxious use. That's all it means. It doesn't mean, as Director Pazesh Kapur was saying, that you have a list, you have properties that you can already jump. No, there's a process to do that. And it just defines where the businesses are at, and that's it. There is no schedule. Just wanted to repeat that, since a lot of the concerns that are being presented tonight and in previous meetings are presented with such alarm, but there is nothing proposed here to identify any business.
Yeah, I'm good for now. I'll definitely come back with more though. But.
Commissioner Leo.
First of all, I want to thank everybody for all the hard work that was put in. I missed the last meeting. Where to start? I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, right next to the freeway. If you know what the San Fernando Valley looked like in the 70s, there was a brown haze known as smog. The individuals that commented almost offended me. The air around here is pretty clear. I grew up when it was brown. I'm sure Mr. Andrade remembers when the 5 freeway, where there was a brown haze in Anaheim because the trucks used to sit in traffic. So let's start where we have progressed to. When I was growing up, cars didn't have catalytic converters. We do have them now. So let's understand where we're at. We are at a point now where we are trying to fix something that is not fixable. And so we are looking to try to find a balance. From my viewpoint, you can give me any air quality study you want. The air is not going to be perfectly clean anytime soon. So let's be fair. Tonight is probably clear because of the rain. Second of all, I want to apologize to residents and businesses that we have not fixed the homeless problem and the crime. Nobody should have to put up with that. And it is a big issue for both residents and businesses. And I know the city council has done a lot, but we need to do more and the county needs to do more. Finance, I appreciate the work put in, giving us taxes. But many of these businesses here today employ people that live in Santa Ana. That isn't captured in the financial damage that could occur to the city when someone can't pay their rent or someone can't pay their license and so on and spend money in Stater Brothers or Northgate or wherever it is. So it can't be captured. So I appreciate the quickness of it and the numbers we got, but it doesn't reflect the true economic impact of what we may decide tonight. The next thing I wanted to talk about was M1 and M2. I'm fully supportive of getting rid of M2. I am not supportive of getting rid of M1 in this area. It's not possible. It's not realistic. But what I am supportive of is if you have a business next to a resident, you better talk to your residents and you better figure out what you got to do with a fence, enclosure, whatever you got to do. Because there is no way we are just going to flip a switch and things are going to be fixed. It took us 100 years to get where we are. It may take us 100 years to get back out. So let's be sensible about this. So from my perspective, there are some things that that I didn't get to comment on at the last meeting that I wanted to. So I can't support the ordinance as is. I could support it if we left M1 intact. I would propose that businesses next to residents be given 6 months to work with the residents to figure out what each individual can live with or not live with. If those individuals cannot comply with fences, enclosures, timely work hours, then that becomes a problem. And we need to allocate staff to solve those problems. Because I heard the residents tonight say, look, we're willing to compromise. We'd like to see good actors stay. I listened to the last meeting. We had issues with live work, people who bought a live work place that could not conduct their business. So we invited somebody to pay money for a house that they were going to work in and then shut them down. It doesn't make any sense. The other issue that I have that is probably beyond this discussion is the size of the transit zone. How big does it have to be? If I read it correctly, it's from the train station to downtown. If I'm reading that correctly, does it have to be that big? Does it have to encompass all these properties? So for me, that's the place where I'm coming from. And I'm going to listen to the rest of my commissioners. The other thing that was raised tonight by somebody else is if they take this to the standard corridor, it's going to cause more problems. We need to get it right tonight. We need to figure out a way to do it. We need to make the recommendations to the city council, and they're the final arbiters. But I appreciate all the input from the residents and the businesses. We could not have even gotten here today without that. There are people there's other neighborhoods that have the same issue. Standard, Artesia Pilar. We know which neighborhoods those are. And we need to work through this as a collective. Because if the businesses aren't successful, our folks aren't employed, they can't pay taxes, the city has no revenue, and the city can't do what it needs to do. We cannot eliminate businesses that generate jobs that then affect the issue that's here. But from a land use perspective, we have to figure out a way to allow certain M1 businesses to survive. If not, many of our residents will be unemployed. And I'm sorry that that's it. But where I'm at is I'm okay with M2, but M1 has to stay and we have to figure out how to make it work. Those are my initial comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Pham.
Chair, sorry, just to be able to provide the commission information. I know some of your points brought up some questions. do want to clarify the live work lofts that exist in and around downtown. Those are not, from building code perspective and zoning perspective, under the present transit zoning code. Forget any amendments that are proposed this evening. Those may not engage presently in any sort of industrial activities. One cannot run like a hazardous waste facility, or using a less extreme example, like a manufacturing facility from the ground floor of a live work. What they can do is like artisan craft manufacturing, for example, which has a definition, or they can do like boutique sales, office, light office, like CPAs, things like that. But I do want to clarify that, for example, none of the M1 uses are
Okay.
presently, forget any amendments, presently permissible in the live work laws,
Thank you.
and thus are not impacted by the ordinance. Thank you.
Commissioner Pham.
Thank you, Chair. I want to clarify, the reason we're here today, what is the mandate from council? What was the whole point of the moratorium? Was it to adjudicate whether or not M1 or M2 is compatible, or was the mandate from council to determine whether the best way to transition the current zoning away from M1 and M2? Because if we understand more clearly what the mandate from council is, because I don't think this commission asked for a rezone of this particular area, right? I think that came from council, or at least direction came from council. If the direction from council was to find a way to transition this area away from M1 to M2, then we can approach that problem with a different lens. If the direction from council was to find a way to have these uses coexist and continue to coexist, then the discussion can be a little bit more different. So I wanted to hear from staff what your impression from council was, because ultimately we're not approving or denying this amendment. It's just a recommendation to council. So if we're following council's direction, then they should have a document that meets their need to deliberate.
Thank you. So when the moratorium was initially adopted unanimously by the city council, the findings that were made to support that moratorium and its subsequent 9-month extension rested on the sort of, in a nutshell, irreconcilable land use conflicts of the area, stemming from the zoning issues, stemming from the operating issues, stemming from non-conforming businesses, noxious businesses, the calls for service, the failure of outside agencies to be responsive to our local land use issues. Those were all encapsulated in the findings that the city council made when adopting the moratorium and extending it. As part of their unanimous decision to extend the moratorium, the city council directed staff to return within 1 year with permanent regulations that would address those findings, address those issues of the moratorium. So what staff has done is take those issues, take council's direction to come up with regulations to address those issues, and proposed what is before you this evening, which includes the map change as well as the text edits to the transit zoning code.
But I think we're in agreement that as is, if nothing changes, there's no solution. We're not bringing any solution to council if nothing changes as is, because irreconcilable zoning, current zoning is, you can't reconcile the industrial use and the residential use. So there needs to be a change. I don't think anyone would feel comfortable recommending to council that no change is needed. That's my impression, right? And so I hope the business owners and the residents understand that there's no path to no change. The only path forward is a change that meets council's needs, which is to reconcile the noxious use and residential use, and whether or not M1 or M2 is compatible. From my understanding is staff is saying we identified that M1 and M2, certain uses of it is not compatible, but be fair and equitable to all parties involved, there is a path to coexistence, which is non-conforming use. And if your business aren't, doesn't apply to non-conforming use, that means that it's not conforming, it's obnoxious. And so that's just something that you have to accept unless there is a path. And my thought when Commissioner Leo brought up the fact that maybe M2 can be excluded, but M1 can stay is I would like some more clarity on if an M2 business is classified as obnoxious, is there a path to transition it to M1 so that property owners can preserve whatever equity they do have if they happen to have an M2 property and they have an irreconcilable use? Is there a path to transition down to M1 so that at least their property can still be in use and they're not forced to sell a property that no longer comply with the current zoning?
So that's a difficult one to speculate on because we don't even have proposed regulations before the commission tonight that address that idea. But I do want to sort of offer some contextualization of the difference between M2 and M1. M1 allows a wide range of industrial and some non-industrial uses like restaurants, ancillary office uses. M2 allows everything in M1, plus about a dozen uses that are highly, highly impactful subject to a conditional use permit. So as our assistant city manager pointed out last time, rezoning from M2 to M1, as it's currently written, would still allow some pretty heavy-duty industrial uses. What it wouldn't allow, for example, is acid manufacturing, right? Already requires a CUP, would already have to come to this commission. What it doesn't allow is, for example, smelting of tin, copper, zinc, or iron ores, right? Again, those uses, many cities aren't even allowed anymore. In this city, they're still allowed with a CUP from the Planning Commission. But if we look back at M1, we are looking at still a wide range of uses that would be allowed. That if the commission were to even say, well, can we modify M1? Then you'd be applying it citywide, right? Those changes, we'd have a much larger audience here tonight, let's put it that way, right? Because the number of affected parties would be very, very large. You'd be talking about the areas of Harbor and MacArthur, Harbor and Sunflower, Dyer, you know, even pockets off Standard, even pockets off West Santa Ana Boulevard by the city yard, all those M1 areas. So you'd be affecting blueprinting, photo engraving, contractors' yards, lumber yards, recycling center, large collection facilities, storage and distribution of hazardous materials, and other uses. It's a very large range. It's about 29 uses allowed in the M1 zone. So hence why, again, staff's recommendation is written as it is, because really going from M2 to M1, it's a very small increment of change. And it's not reflective of those findings that the city council made when it said, here's why we have an issue, and please come back with permanent regulations.
Thank you. That's all for me.
Commissioner Wu.
Tonight, we have a lot of opinions, and we have a lot of speculation, and we also have a lot of misinformation based on how you perceive the situation. However, when I look at this document, which is all your zoning regulation, and as I look at the amendments based on after the meeting with the business and community that amends those things that to meet what has been asked from both the resident side and from the business side, I see that in the amendment, we're trying to get there. Okay. Now, as far as a few other things, I like to have some fun, okay, if you permit me, and I might get out of hand, okay. The thing is that there's 19 pages of, so just to define permitted use under M1. So I went back 15 years to kind of understand how we got to where we are with this overlay with the transit district and all that. And I kind of found that we've been updating the general plan to kind of fulfill our vision of what we want for the city. And in it, we kind of realized that there have been things that we've done through the years that made neighborhoods, business area, commercial area, having a lot of mixed hodgepodge kind of thing. So I think that in the genius of you guys knowing your zoning laws and things very well, you're trying to make it work based on what is there without trying to destruct everything that is there already. Okay. And a case in point is that then it started me thinking, is there a win-win situation where we can have it both ways? Everyone wins. Okay. So I asked myself, in that area, isn't it already mixed use? So why can't it stay mixed use? So that's the first question I asked you earlier. The second thing is then it revolved around the issue of taking, and then in the U.S. Constitution, amended version versus the California Constitution, Article 1, Section 19, it says that we can, as a government agency, acquire property, but you just can't do it. Okay, there must be a process or something. In Los Angeles versus Cage, it says amortization is not taking. I repeat, amortization is not taking. Okay, so get that out of your head. Okay, so if we were to ignore these things and assume that it is taking, then I'd like to ask Executive Director for you to call the police chief and put handcuffs on Mike right now and put padlocks on his property so that we could take it away. Can't do that. Neither do we desire to do that, which is not what you're trying to do in the zoning. What you're trying to do is develop a process that we could get there versus litigating it here and deciding all that before you even met with the people, looked at the property and talked to them about the situation. So that's probably why I'm a little animated because I realized in reading this, you're just trying to set up the process and it says so. Adopt number one, the recommendation action that we're asked to do today. If you read all this stuff, we adopt a resolution to make the finding pursuant to the public resource section 21166 and adopt an addendum to the Transit Code Environmental Impact Report. Because why? We had the meeting out there and you talked to the residents and the business and you incorporate. Then we, number two, adopt an ordinance to approve zoning ordinance amendment number 2024-02, amending certain sections of the article X1X, the Transit Zoning Code, and the Pacific Development 84, et cetera, okay? Then we want to adopt an ordinance because we have to adopt an ordinance in order to do this, to get to the point where we have all the rules so that you can meet with people and do that to alleviate the fear that your property is going to be taken away with and you have nothing to pass on to your family. So we can't get there unless we do something to move this process along, okay? And we cannot speculate about what this language means because you could interpret it one way, I could interpret it one way, and someone else can interpret it one way. So I think you're doing your job here is trying to make our zoning process work. Now, historically though, I would have to agree, and I do remember, Joe, that the Logan neighborhood made a deal so that they could preserve the housing because at the time, after the Civic Center was built, there was 500 homes removed in the Civic Center area to make way for the Civic Center. And in Sano, we fought back to make sure that no other neighborhood would lose their housing because that was what they wanted to do to remove low-income housing. Now, what this ordinance tried to do is we're trying to protect low-income housing. because we're using the state law that says that we're gonna do that. So based on that, we don't use the language grandfather, but if we get to the point of adopting it and getting to that amortization court and the hearing with the executive director, I think there's a way of grandfathering, which is terminology referred to legal non-conforming use, which is what is in here now, okay? This referred to a property or use that does not comply with current zoning regulation, but is permitted because it exists lawfully before regulations change. Okay, so grandfathering or grandfather card essentially mean the same thing. Okay, now how you apply it is what we're looking forward to do after we approve this thing. Okay, so again, I was asking myself in researching all this and going back 15 years, could a existing zone with pre-existing residents, a residential use, continue to live together in harmony and healthy? And I think that that's what we were trying to do. Yeah, am I wrong or right? Or are you going to call the police on me and lock me up? I made an illustration of if we were living in a dictatorship, that's what a certain orange person would do, but this is not us. This is not the city, because we talk things over and we have had meetings to do that. We listen to the community, and now it's up to us to make a decision to move forward. So, did you get my 3 questions?
Yes. So to break it down, thank you, Commissioner Wu. The ordinance amendments that are proposed before the commission tonight reflect what you summarized. They contain operating standards for what would be called the legal non-conforming businesses, giving them an opportunity to begin compliance with those measures, things that are intended to enhance the harmony between the land uses. So operating standards, things like improved lighting or reduction of idling vehicles.
So can you repeat that? It's to give them an opportunity, right?
Correct. So that's component number 1. To memorialize that so that there's no ambiguity for any future planners that are sitting here one day. That's where the tool of the voluntary compliance agreement comes into play. So that's where you memorialize it on a case-by-case basis if needed. That's also why we have staff reports. We don't just bring ordinances to City Council. We have staff reports describing what is the intent, what is the rationale, the analysis behind each one of these sections to elucidate that for future generations and the community, not just our decision makers who vote on these items. When these provisions like failure to comply with operating standards do not work for a particular business, that's when you get into the realms of escalating tools needed to address the bad operators, the worst of the offenders. And that's where you see what we've talked about before. Amortization as an extreme tool as a last resort. But the ordinance's inclusion of operating standards for these legal non-conforming industrial business is a reflection of that opportunity to come into compliance. And to memorialize that, that's why we've introduced the voluntary compliance.
So we have something in writing that we could use to look at our property and our usage and all that and see how we comply, how we not. If not, we could go to the hearing and ask for a legal non-conforming use because we've done other things to comply with it, right?
Correct, with the exception that the hearing comes into play with amortization again in the scenarios that I've described.
So that's spelled out here. Now, the question that Commissioner Leo brought up regarding the transit zone, and I don't want to relitigate it, but can you summarize how we got here with the transit zone, which changes the existing mixed use, which allow us to have what we have now, which is okay, except for we get a lot of complaint about the crematorium and other eyesores in the neighborhood, which is what you're trying to respond to, so we don't have a lot of the complaint.
Yeah, thank you. So the boundaries of the transit zoning code are not being proposed to change as part of the recommended actions. That has been clarified extensively during community meetings as well. The boundaries of the transit zoning code were established in July 2010 when the city council adopted the transit zoning code, and they reflect not just the zoning, but the corresponding general plan land use designations underneath that. So the boundary, think about it twofold in some ways. It's a zoning boundary, but even if you peel back the zoning and you look at general plan, it's a corresponding geographic area. 2010, actually this commission helped modernize the transit zoning code and adopt some amendments that helped clarify some things for projects that you might be proud of, like the Rafferty development in downtown. 2019, that was updated again, summer of 2019. No change to the boundary.
So in 2010, we were developing the trolley, right? And the trolley goes around in a circle, right?
The OC streetcar actually is more linear from the train station towards our neighbors in Garden Grove. I would describe it as a line.
So in a way, considering what Commissioner Leo say, is there a way of looking at the transit plan to make the hotel and, you know, a downtown Renaissance work, okay, but not suffer in terms of peace between two factions out in Logan, you know, that have lived and coexisted, that got used to each other, you know, but as you build more of these high-rise and loft, you have people that are begging. We also got a letter from someone that live in the loft that want to get some kind of commercial value out of what they're doing. Either they're going to make greeting cards or something like that, and we have to have a zoning that can kind of accommodate that. And then the mixed use they can, but if we take away some of the M1 and the M2 overlay, can those kinds of businesses exist? And will we be able to track other kind of businesses that are more dealing with coding and internet and you know, that'll bring in different kinds of jobs?
Yes. So as a clarification, those train station lofts were originally entitled under a separate specific development even before the transit zoning code, hence their construction date. So even before all this M1, M2 overlay, those had their own specific development. And when the transit zoning code was adopted in 2010, they were absorbed into the transit zoning code zoning area. But again, going back to the why we're here tonight, the city council's direction was come back with permanent regulations addressing the topics that we've covered during the study session, during the February 24th meeting, and tonight. That did not include revisiting the boundaries of the transit zoning code. So I want to be sort of intentional about why staff has brought this set of recommended actions, because it does still fit within what the city council asked for.
And contrary to our impression, we didn't rush this, number one. We didn't just do this overnight, because you can't do this stuff overnight. This has been a long developing, slow rolling train of developing to get here, based on a lot of input from different sources and a lot of analysis of data in the area. So, and I just want to reiterate that this is not an overnight thing. And we're here today because something the city council has started and now have directed, but gave pause so that we can talk about and have those dialogue, and we did. And now we have to come to a decision. Thank you very much.
I want to thank staff for listening to the directives that we did assign to y'all on the February 24th meeting. Thank you for hosting the meeting between business and residents. I know that was you know, a little bit of a short notice, but I'm happy to hear that 120 people attended. Like, it goes to show that we did need that additional conversation. And then I do
Oh, by the way,
appreciate,
can I clean up my comment with Mike? I know Mike from the community, and I was just joking around to make to kind of illustrate it, you know, maybe foolishly, why we can't take away your property. Okay.
I also appreciate the amendments and edits made and provided to us. I like how Commissioner Wu said, this is not something that is done overnight, so I do appreciate the thoughtfulness in it. Hearing the conversations that are happening tonight and talking about fairness and is this ordinance and are these amendments fair? Looking at the operation standards that start, I believe, on page 1, that start on page 24. I don't see some of these standards being so outrageous and out of this world that cannot be done or complied with if you're designated as a legal nonconforming business, because it's the all or nothing conversation that's happening too. That's a little, I guess the word would be like off-putting, because it's almost like if we can't continue not having any rules, and if we can't continue polluting in Santa Ana, we're going to go find another city to go and pollute in. I don't know if that's the conversation we're really supposed to have or the message some of the businesses are trying to share, but that's what it's coming off as. So I know that there, you know, clarification will be made, but that's a little of what it sounds like. And I know that's not what some of the businesses mean. But I do appreciate the speedy work on listening to what businesses and residents have to say and making those edits for us and letting us host this this special meeting. But do any additional commissioners have any statements? Commissioner Benninger?
Thank you. I do appreciate the time that's been presented. This was actually asked for and started to work on in April, and we only saw it in February. So I think we've done a lot of work in a short period of time to get it to this point. And if you look at where we started the first meeting that we had in February to where we are now, we have made some changes, and I appreciate that. I also appreciate being taken around this area today to be able to see where the concerns are out there. But to just simplify, because this has changed over the time. So just to verify, and I know this is simple, but let's just take it this way. If I have a non-conforming business, it's not noxious use, I can continue on doing that business for as long as I choose, correct?
Correct.
I can sell that business down the road if I choose.
Correct.
If I have a building that I'm running out, I can continue to rent that building to light industry.
Correct.
Is there any regulations on if the industry changes widgets to softballs, let's say, what prevents me from going to softballs? Let's put it that way.
As long as there's no intensification of the impacts of that manufacturing. So for example, if one is manufacturing widgets and you would expect a normal volume of deliveries, shipments, emissions, things like that. If the softball manufacturing has sort of similar impacts, secondary, tertiary, no problem.
Okay. So the concern that we've seen for people saying, I've just bought a building, I'm renting it out, they can continue with business.
I would also supplement that by saying that one of the highlights of this ordinance is that in spite of everything we just said, right, removal of the M1, M2 renders you legal nonconforming, and you can still continue like-for-like activities. The use matrix that begins on page 19 of the ordinance and continues on for 4 more pages.
Correct.
Actually contains a much more expanded list of business types that could re-tenant that building. So should the owner elect to or have difficulty finding a tenant that equally manufactures widgets, let's say, they can choose to move in previously impermissible uses that now the city is proposing so that these buildings don't sit vacant and become a problem for the city, right? Or problem
Correct.
for residences too.
Correct.
Vandalism, vacancy, all that. That's why the use matrix contains so many proposed modifications in order to expand the usability of these buildings in spite of the removal of the M1, M2 overlay.
Okay. That's a different story than what we started off 3 weeks ago.
Thanks to the commission's guidance and the public input.
One, and I don't think this is new to this permit, but I don't understand why if someone is in a yard area behind 8-foot fence, why they cannot do chores in their yard area, why it has to be enclosed building. Can you explain why that's so?
What's proposed, as Commissioner Benninger, you're summarizing, is that operations need to be moved indoors, because what we found through the outreach process and listening to business owners is that the businesses that are actually operating in fully enclosed buildings are the ones that I'll just summarize back saying no one has an issue with, right? They're the ones that, because they are built to modern codes, they have good sound attenuation, they have good air filtration, good design, good site planning, all the things that we bring forward to you on a bi-monthly basis or twice monthly basis. Those are the elements that make them non-impactful, one of which is the fully enclosed operations. So then you look at the data that Margarita's team so diligently, harvested from outside agencies and from our own internal records, and found that the calls for service, the emissions, the vibrations, the dust, those are most often coming from businesses that have outdoor operations associated with them, like contractors yard type businesses or other types of businesses that are primarily outdoors. So that's why in most settings, let's look at the Irvine Business Complex, right? One of the first overlays in Orange County that allowed residential in industrial zones, kind of the opposite of the transit zoning code, the way that the zoning was written. The Irvine Business Complex, virtually every industrial activity that's done in that area is inside of a building. You could drive up and down Jamboree, Von Carmen, McGaw, Alton, Barranca. You will not see a contractor's yard. You'll not see any outdoors operations. You'll see everything in enclosed buildings that were built starting largely in the 60s and 70s. And recognizing that the city back then, again, another jurisdiction, different values, said they're enclosed, maybe residential is compatible here. But because we have a much older and different setting here, that's why this regulation is proposed, among others, for your consideration tonight.
Thank you.
Commissioner Scamilla.
Thank you, Chair. All right. Okay. So, like in the spirit of trying to make this a better document by the time it's in front of the City Council, I'm wondering if there were any considerations or any kind of provisions around adaptive reuse of existing industrial structures. So I know that we have general adaptive reuse policies in place, but there are actually just a lot of cool older industrial buildings that could potentially be used for other uses, not necessarily a full demo or tear down. And then sometimes just because of the way that they're situated, they might benefit from grandfathered in side yards or less landscaping, just whatever kind of site-specific situations might benefit development to include and retain structures over time, just because I think that there are some down there worth keeping that might potentially be of historic quality. I'm wondering if that's included here or can be potentially just incorporated via other sections of the code.
Yes.
Yeah.
Long answer.
Yeah.
Santa Ana actually has Orange County's first adaptive reuse ordinance, and the entirety of the transit zoning code is in that adaptive reuse ordinance.
Perfect.
Not to mention the expanded use matrix. So whether it's adaptive reuse for industrial to commercial or industrial to other uses, the entirety of the transit zoning code boundary area is adaptive reuse.
Okay, perfect. Let's see. And this might just be more for once the conversation gets to council. I know we didn't get the additional details on where the individual tax receipts, business license fees and everything, because that's confidential. But wondering more generally, is there like a generic power law distribution where it's basically 20% of the businesses contributing 80% of like either business or sales tax, or kind of what we're seeing there? So I don't need the answer right now, but that would, just be good to know that if there are, let's say 3 to 4 major contributors to each one of those buckets, kind of how will this impact them? I think once you start getting into city council, they're going to ask a little bit more about the money. We're concerned about land use. So that's just one thing to figure out. If we know that, I think we should be able to figure it out, but I don't know what the answer is. So no answer needed right now, unless, yeah, we're all looking at finance director or former finance director, but no, it's, I just want to make sure the question's understood.
If you don't mind rephrasing the question, thank you.
Sorry, so just a general power law distribution, let's say 20% of the businesses account for 80% of the revenue coming to the city, just trying to figure out if there are, 1, 2, 3, or 4 major anchors that are basically making up a majority of what those financial, what that financial data is. Because again, we can't get the specifics, but I'm just wondering, again, once you get over to city council, if that information will be available to them to let them know what basic types of uses are actually generating the revenue within this zone. So it's, yeah, again, don't expect it now, but definitely I think for council that would be useful for them. Number 4, I think we answered the live work question, which was this is not impacting live work at all. So the concern from the resident, we can let them know that don't worry, whatever you were allowed to do before is still okay. I think that's okay. I'm seeing a nod, yes. Let's see. I guess I would emphasize just for the audience and the folks here, this is still, I almost feel like just the beginning of a long process, right? There, for the steps that you've enumerated, nothing's going to happen overnight. But I am wondering if we do have a general sense as to when this is coming before the city council and kind of how that's looking at this point.
Staff's goal is to present this to the city council on April 1st of this year. And then as you shared, Commissioner, this is an ordinance. It's not a sort of plan for amortization. This is not a schedule. This is an enabling ordinance, just like any other zoning document. And following, if this ordinance were to be effective, as with any other ordinance that affects land use, the city would, as we've had through the life of the moratorium, a team obviously of not just planning, but economic development, finance, building, and others that would be sort of implementing this ordinance in unison to ensure if there are businesses that could find other locations, for example, in the city, that's accommodated. Mm-hmm. If there's not, then other resources are helped provided to adapt them. Or obviously, in the worst case scenarios, again, amortization, if that is on the menu.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. And I do also want to emphasize it to the audience because we've seen that there have been edits that have happened over the last 3 weeks. For me, it does appear that maybe that, beginning that page 19 of the use sections, if there is a case to be made for other categories, because again, we're not editing M1, that's a much larger discussion, but allowing and editing the allowable uses within the transit zoning code, we've already added in different uses. And basically between now and we're hearing April 1st would then be a time to make a case for any other potential categories to include or to at least make the argument in front of city council. I think that that's reasonable to tell the audience. Is that correct? Or at least reasonable?
This remains a public process, hence tonight's meeting, for example. And again, as you shared, Commissioner, the city council is a public hearing process as well.
All right. So I guess there was actually a scenario that emerged after Carl's comments on, being able to have the various different uses. And as we look at the map, some of these overlay zones are in urban neighborhood 1 and urban neighborhood 2 designations, which are relatively limited in what is allowed by right. So I'm just imagining scenarios in which we have what is a fairly purpose-built industrial structure, that maybe might not make it to like, it's not going to convert over to a single family home, might be able to be a work, live loft. But I'm wondering what available flexibility could be built in to allow other, you'd say, quote unquote, compatible uses. And again, this is very much a question. I have no idea what the answer is to that. But again, to those scenarios where, let's say you have these older structures that could be converted to something that maybe in a corridor district we would allow, or we would allow within the downtown zone, or within higher intensity uses that should or potentially could be applied within already built structures in UN1 and UN2 sites that now are no longer going to be M1 or M2.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I'll just call attention to an example that was built in with that mindset. So currently in other commercial zones in the city, like C1, C2, C5, indoor commercial recreation, like a karaoke bar, requires a conditional use permit approval from this body, right? But in this ordinance, that would be a sort of permissible use up to 5,000 square feet, which is typical of some of the smaller industrial businesses you see, or industrial buildings you see in the area. That's just an example, right? Indoor commercial recreation could be indoor axe throwing, let's say, indoor sport, right? Up to 5,000 square feet, allowed administratively. So it's not only going to be allowed if it were approved, it would be allowed with a streamlined process, right? Again, with that mindset of helping business owners have increased flexibility with how they could help transition the buildings from being industrial to still reading industrial, but being more commercial in nature.
Yeah, and whatever flexibility, if there are other opportunities to incorporate that, I think that would also allow different uses, and also just more security in the sense of having different options for the property owner. Again, if we have these older structures that are maybe not going to be heavy industrial anymore, but are not, again, going to be converted to a single family home overnight within our more limited zoning, even within this transit zoning code. So just a observation there. Let's see. I would say, to those folks out here, and this is more just kind of talking to the audience now, I think the transit zoning code has been, looked at as a walkable urban community with light rail, really great access to public transportation, bike lanes, shade trees. It's, honestly, I would say, one of the only neighborhoods in Orange County where you can live without a car. I've done it, and it's actually really pleasant, and that's why so many people like to live down here. So making the argument that people are a bad thing to introduce into a downtown is not necessarily a winning argument. I would not kind of repeat that again, just because for those of us up here that maybe weren't able to buy a home in the 1960s, having an urban experience and accessible housing is really important for the future of the city. And we do have to find a way to balance that. So I do always am a little apprehensive whenever I hear that, people are a bad thing. I think the reason why we are a wonderful community is we welcomed so many different people from so many different places. And I would hesitate to ever be part of a place that would say it's full and doesn't want anyone and doesn't want anyone new coming in. I think that's a bad way to try to plan for the future. So that's more of the soapbox. But other than that, I think we are trending in the right direction. So I really appreciate staff. I really appreciate the residents and the business owners that came out. This document is better because of your efforts. I believe that we're about 80 to 85% of the way there, but we will still have more to go to finalize.
Commissioner Leo.
I kind of said what I wanted to say. I wanted to understand, you have the table of uses. So on page 21, there's that whole section that's marked off. Basically, light manufacturing can't be done in the M1 zone. I mean, in this zone, if it's approved by council as is. And what I'm getting at is, if that is the case, we are zoning out manufacturing in this area. If these businesses decide to leave and move, wherever they move to, there's no more manufacturing in this area. Light manufacturing, correct?
Correct, with the exception of the artisan and craft manufacturing.
So hear me out. Hear me out. We have,
If I could just clarify,
Yeah, go ahead.
So this ordinance, if a business were to leave, would not preclude that tenant space to be reoccupied by the same type of industrial use. So this wouldn't kick those businesses out. If those businesses choose to leave, that same location would be able to be re-tenanted with the same type of industrial use, provided there's no intensification of use. That's what we were describing when we were discussing non-conforming or legal non-conforming.
But we're pretty, here's the message we're sending. We're sending, you could stay just in this area. You can't intensify, you can't grow your business. We don't want you to grow your business. We want you to stay the same in perpetuity or attract the same thing in perpetuity, without any adjustment or adjustability to attract a certain type of businesses that I look at my high school, I look at Century High School, I look at these kids. I have one in my own home. He likes to work with his hands. Where's he going to go? Where's he going to work? There's a whole bunch of people that's what they do for a living. We are not attracting those type folks. We're not even making an effort. Anaheim makes an effort. We're not making an effort. And what concerns me is that when you have large populations of folks that want to work with their hands, which we do in Santa Ana, they pile in here every city council meeting. When there's a construction project, when there's roads to be built, we got a whole bunch of people live in the city like that. When we start to exclude just for residents, we are killing our tax base and we are killing the pipe dream or the pipeline of other workers. They will live elsewhere and they will not spend their money in Santa Ana. So what's concerning to me is we're starting to constrict what you can have. If you look at the things you can have, am I an urgent care, a dentist? I mean, there are things here that are going to generate no sales tax, going to not help our youth, none of it. And it's all service oriented. So it's a service oriented business. I heard excavation tonight. I heard metals. I heard other things that are essential, that are still essential to businesses that we just brought in the city. We're bringing Anduril into the southern end of the city. Anybody know what Anduril is? If you know what Anduril is, they make drones. They make underwater stuff. They got high-end stuff, but they need people to make the pieces for them. We're starting to narrow that down to a point where we are starting to eliminate certain types of businesses in the city. We're going to let them stay, but we're not going to let them grow. Why would you stay if you can't grow? So that's my issue. And I may be the only one, but I am very, very concerned that we're going down the wrong road here and limiting what we can attract to the city. Basically, what you're saying is we can attract the same businesses in the same location, the same size, but nothing else. No intensification, no other stuff. We got to figure this one out. If we don't, we lose our manufacturing base and we lose half of the folks that go to the schools in the city. If you look at what people are trying to do, we're trying to bring back auto shop, carpentry, the apprentice programs from the unions. Those people work with their hands. And we are basically saying, guess what? We don't want it. You want to do service stuff? You can do it. So I'm concerned at the direction we're going. But if that's what council wants, that's what they want. But I'm currently, I can't say it with a straight face that that's the direction we should go in.
Commissioner Pham.
You know, I can only evaluate what we have here based on the direction from council. So, you know, my deliberation is going to be based on, you know, the assessment of council that what's existing does not conform with what their direction for the city is. Whether or not I think removing M1 or M2 is fair or not, you know, it's to me, I have my own personal opinion on whether or not it's fair or not, but the task at hand is just to confirm and reaffirm whether or not this solution conforms with the direction from council, which is find a way to reconcile these irreconcilable usage, which I think is acceptable as is. And, the removal of, my understanding is the removal of M1 and M2 is to this zone and not to the city. The city still has multiple M1s at, zones. And so I think, just like I think many other cities, I don't think we are removing an industrial base, or we're removing because, like Commissioner Leo just stated, we do have Andrew, right? So they're allowed to function within the city. So it's not like we're kicking out M1 usage. Right now, it looks like we are not encouraging M1 usage in this particular zone, but we are not eliminating the use. In my reading of it, we're not eliminating the use. We are just saying, and I like the word not to intensify, because it seems like the crux of it is that council is asking, what is a way for us to address the residents' concern? And the only way to address the residents' concern is just not to intensify the current use, because we already identified that the current use is not compatible with the vision of what council wants. Now, if we were to say blanket, this does not conform, and so tomorrow, all M1, M2 usage need to vacate the city immediately upon execution of this document, then yes, I think that's extremely unfair. But I think this document does do what it's meant to do. It's meant to identify that currently the status quo is not acceptable. We will not intensify what is being permitted, but we will not direct a cease and desist, right? So I think both party wins. The residents will have the security that, worst case, every single business, not worst case, sorry. Let's say best case, every single businesses is a non-conforming use. There's no bad actors. Then at least the residents can know that, all right, that's the status quo. It won't get worse. Whether or not it's good or bad, that's the residents' opinion, but it won't get worse, right? And at least the business owners, because it seems like to me, 90% of the business owners that are represented today, we all feel that our business is not a bad actor, right? Because I haven't seen a single business owner come up today and say, I'm a bad actor. Everyone else is a good actor. I'm a bad actor. So I think it's going to be very hard to please everyone, because no one admits that they're a bad actor. Everyone thinks that they're a conforming use. So if that's the case, then you're well within your right to operate within this area. If you don't think you're within the right to operate within this area, it might be that you're a bad actor. And so, and it's not my opinion. It's not the council's opinion. It's not the commission's opinion. We have a document that will let you know whether or not you're a bad actor or a good actor. And I'm sure like 9% of the businesses here, they're good actors, so they can continue to operate. You have a 10% increase in square footage if you needed to kind of remedy certain things that you need to remedy to conform. And so at first I thought there was no win-win, but I think that this is a win-win. Residents are secure that they will not have a condition that's any worse than what they have now, because the whole point of this amendment is to not to intensify any current usage. And the business owners, as long as you feel that you're a good actor, which I feel like everyone here have stated that their business does not impact any of the residents, then I think you have no issue conforming to what is being laid out in this document before us today. And if you do not feel that way, you have another opportunity to present your case to council, because ultimately council makes that decision. And staff has laid out, even if council executes this amendment, you have a pathway to adjudicate your specific needs through the amortization and through the third-party adjudicator. So as it currently sits, I think there is multiple pathways to success for the residents and to the business owners. And any time longer to deliberate and to adjust, ultimately, you're still going to ask for adjustment when this is presented to council. So like I stated previously, as business owners, I assume you want certainty. You want a clear path to preserve your business or to advance your business. The clearest path to do so is to not have this be on a standstill, come back to us in the 30 days, 60 days. That's not going to be the remedy that you want, because ultimately it still needs to go to council. So my recommendation to you is, you have additional issue with this document, I would present your case to council, because ultimately that's the governing body of the city. What we're doing here today is just to evaluate whether or not this is good enough to go to council. Whether or not council approves this, that's up to council, and it's not what we are delivering today. That's my opinion on the matter.
Commissioner Wu.
If I was to start a business, there's a guide here, several pages, and embedded in here what I need to do. And if all I had to do was get a permit, I'm gonna ask how much, or if I had to come before the planning commission, it spells out you get a conditional use permit. So there's a guide and there's a zoning. Okay, if I have an existing business, and as we remove these, there's a process to deal with your situation. So at any rate, like Bob Wynn, I'd like to move it forward only because we could go back and forth forever, picking on things, coming up with things, and scenario real or unreal, and it will not change the thing that, you know, you need a parking permit or a conditional use permit, or you need to not store your stuff outside where rats can get to it without an enclosure and stuff like that, because it spells it out what you got to do to be conforming. Now, if you don't conform, it says you could be legal, which means you can operate there, and no one's going to take your property, and but you'll be non-conforming, which means you don't fit in. So we could grandfather what you did fit in for the last 70 years, you know, and that means, Joe, your house is okay because that's grandfather in, you know, whether it conforms or not, you know, be legal conform for the area. So I'm satisfied that there's enough win-win in the situation to kind of move forward. And I'd like to make a motion when it's appropriate.
So Commissioner Wu, I have a motion from you on this matter. Is there a second?
What was the motion?
The motion was to approve the amendment of the ordinance as is
So just,
recommended.
just say, Commissioner Wu, yeah, is that the
Can
full
we go to the
recommendations?
slide?
Yeah.
So the motion would be to adopt a resolution to make findings pursuant to.
Just to clarify, you could just say we recommend that the city council and then go off this menu.
Okay, so we recommend, so the commission recommends to the council to adopt a resolution to make findings pursuant to Public Resources Code Section 21166 and adopt the amendment to the Transit Zoning Code Environmental Impact Report. Adopt an ordinance to approve zoning ordinance amendment number 2024-02, amending certain sections of Article 19 of Chapter 41 of the Santa Ana Municipal Code. Sorry, I'm not trying to read every single word on here. Adopt an ordinance to approve amendment application number 2024-03, amending the zoning by removing the M1 and M2 suffixes from certain properties within the SD 84 zoning district boundary as designated by the City of Santa Ana zoning map. So I have a motion from from Commissioner Wu. Do I have a second?
I wanted a second, but I wanted to have one comment. I was just, if that's okay. Wu?
We
or-
we
yeah.
can add discuss, yes.
Yeah, so again, I'm seconding the motion. And I think for me, part of the um, real concern from the business community is that, we're basically trying to push people out based off of this idea of like, getting in new developers and displacing existing businesses and kind of like building up the location. But even as I look at the map and what we're going to, like, if we really wanted to do that, there's certain current industrial parcels that are zoned and relatively at lower densities at UN 1 or 2. But obviously from staff, we're not seeing any intensification of uses, right? Like whatever is the underlying zone is what was staying. We're not converting anything from a UN 1 to a UN 2 to an urban center to a downtown to anything that for most logical planning documents, again, I'm just looking at places immediately around that urban center south of Santiago, where honestly, it seems like it's a missing gap. You would probably want to intensify that area, but again, that's not the intent. The intent is very limited to this conversation around in a downtown area, should heavy and light industrial and quote unquote light industrial be a compatible use? So that's why I'm seconding your motion, is that I believe that the recommendations being brought forward by staff do try to answer and address that issue, which is they're not compatible as written, so that we need to do something about it. And I think staff has brought forward an item that is defensible. Anyways, that's my second with comment.
If I might add, this is not an economic development plan. It's just a zoning plan. If this was an economic development plan, I would chastise the community development department for not doing enough to bring more business in the area. Okay, but this is not what it is. Okay, so if you want to add something, we encourage you to do more development. That's a whole nother matter. But I think simply the three is just to pass these zoning changes and amendment to make it compatible to have the existing situation there, and then we move forward with other stuff.
Just Commissioner Wu, since you made the motion, and Commissioner Escamilla, since you seconded it, I would like to also just remind the commission that Exhibit 2 was proposed clarifications to the ordinance reflecting additional community input from the train station meeting on Monday. So I'd like you to just clarify whether your seconding includes that.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I thought that was included by. Yeah.
And just to add, during staff's presentation, there was an additional edit included that was read into the record to include paint. And
So all that become part of the record, right? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Verbal and visual, yes.
Secretary, please call for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Benninger,
No.
Commissioner Escamilla,
Aye.
Commissioner Leo,
No.
Commissioner Pham,
Aye.
Commissioner Wu,
Aye.
Vice Chair Ramos, Chair Oliva.
Aye.
Motion approved with Commissioner Benninger, Commissioner Leo dissenting, and Commissioner Ramos absent.
That concludes the public hearing. Moving on to staff comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Commission, and thank you to everyone that showed up tonight. This has been a long night. It's a heavy topic. I do appreciate your discussion on this matter, and thank you, and good night.
Does the commission have any comments or questions for staff? Commissioner Benninger.
I'd just like to thank everyone that's come out and all the work that's been done and all the help that I was given with this. Even though I didn't agree with it, but I do appreciate it. Thank you.
If I can have the room silent, we're still continuing the meeting. Thank you so much. Commissioner Escamilla.
Yeah, no, just thanking staff, everyone that came out, fellow commissioners. It's not an easy question. This is what you're here for, and I think it was a healthy discussion and healthy dissent. And I think that there's going to be some reasonable stuff. Items closed, but just want to thank everyone for. I think is our second special that we've had together now. So, yeah.
Commissioner Leo.
Yeah, I had a question about, is there a way to get a map of the city? You might have to get some information from the school district, I don't know, but there were gaps in internet and Wi-Fi services during COVID to neighborhoods and to schools, to kids who go to school. And is there a way to get a map where those gaps are? Because I feel like we should be doing something from a planning perspective to encourage those gaps to be filled, so that council can meet with Google or whoever they need to meet with to fill the gaps. Because if you drive through cities, Santa Ana is the worst city. Calls are still drop. Things happen. And I'm not in the airport zone. So we as a planning commission need to figure out how to encourage to fill the gaps. And I'm sure there's plenty of code language out there how we can do it to encourage the investment to fill the gaps. Because if we're going to attract businesses and attract the type of people we want to be here, live, work, digital nomads, those type people, we need to have the infrastructure. And the only way we do that is to put in the planning code to encourage that type of investment. So if there's a way to do it, if there's a way to get a map of the gaps, maybe it's around the schools and then we can work with the school district. If not, we'll figure out how to do it. But just some ways to do it, because when you go to LA, I don't know if you know this, but MTA on the bus stops has Wi-Fi. You can actually sit there and have a hotspot in Los Angeles at a bus stop. We can't do that, but yet we have somebody on OCTA, and we have the biggest bus ridership in the county, and yet we don't do that, right? So between us and Anaheim. So just if we could start that process, that discussion, because I think at the end of the day, our residents deserve it, and we shouldn't have to pay the highest cable fees in the county to do so. So if that's something we could start to think about, that would be great. Thanks.
Commissioner Pham.
Thank you, staff, for the presentation. A lot of clarity here tonight. I would like to ask for some flexibility on the heating and cooling in the dais because it's very cold. You know, when I'm making my comment, I'm half shaking because I'm nervous. The other half, I'm shaking because it's so cold. Yeah. Commissioner Wu actually has a hot coffee.
It's tea.
A tea. So
Chinese tea.
that's my request for next meeting is maybe we kind of heat it up when it's raining, cool it down when it's hot. Yeah. Other than that, another comment, because Commissioner Leo, you brought the wireless. You know, I know this is not our responsibility, but it does pertain to land use in the sense that obviously we're aware of the homeless issue around the city. My issue is that, because it's personal to me, is that a lot of the new townhouses that are being proposed throughout the city, a lot of the utility closets and kind of like trash enclosures, they're exposed to the public. And, you know, obviously the HOAs and those development, they'll take care of maintaining it, but these are point of access for people to kind of break into, use as, you know, coverage when it's needed. But I want to be sensitive, but it's also very unfair for the residents having to deal with walking outside, and then these developments, you know, have someone there that is blocking your way. And policy aside, it could be good planning practice to ask for developments to secure these areas better, just so that it doesn't cause inconvenience for the residents. My general comment.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wu.
My vote in moving this forward was not for one group or the other. What I was looking forward to was to.
Min, I don't know if you want to chime in.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. At any rate, I think we got to look at ways of uniting the community. together. And we have 4 more zones like this to go through as a commission. And if we're going to be facing the same kind of challenges with those other 4 neighborhoods. The one that you mentioned, I know my wife's going to show up there, so I got to deal with that. So, but these are old things that have been done because we have historically have had hodgepodge, and we're trying to make sure that we have clarity. And I appreciate the direction we're going in general, not specific to a project.
I just want to thank staff for taking the time to really work on this because it's not easy to have a meeting on, what was it, Monday, the 3rd, and then to have things ready and edited and present it to us on, what day is it today? The 6th? Like, I truly appreciate it. There's a lot of work that goes into this that I don't think any of us see. So thank you so much. With that, this meeting is adjourned. The next regular meeting is scheduled for March 10, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. Thank you.